the Philippines and the National Library of the Philippines. A warm of applause, please.
Good afternoon. I see a lot of familiar faces. For foreign delegates, welcome to the Philippines. We hope you are enjoying your stay despite our Marawi crisis. Okay, I'm with the National Library. I've been there for the last 10 years. But I used to work with the University of the Philippines teaching library science, particularly automation. Prior to that, I worked with an American company here in Ayala to do um, outsourcing job for databases. So I have experience with PsycInfo database. Um, I have worked with Elsevier databases. I have worked with engineering index databases. And I also design litigation support services for our American company to work with a lot of large companies, large cases. One of my last litigation support service project was the Exxon Valdez. So here at the National Library, we started to look at the open source solution to solve the financial aspect of library system. We started early on in 1996 doing using library automation, particularly standalone systems. That year we are working with paper worksheets. We have encoding sections. The end goal is just to produce the list and 3 by 5 cards. Back then, the National Library is using the TinLib system. And we also did use, for some parts, Philsoft, a locally made library system. And our storage basically are tape drives. A few years later, we migrated to a network environment. We used the TLC, the library solution package, and we deployed this to around 175 libraries nationwide. But the cost is so limiting to a lot of our local government units. In some cases, the annual license is higher than their budget to purchase books. So 10 years, when I get back to, I went to the National Library. The challenge then was to find an alternative to TLS. Basically, the most relevant question that has to be answered then was a solution that has similar quality, but at the same time, a minimal cost. So we are looking at the cost ratio of the software. We have created a list of checklists, identified both commercial and open source software in 2007, and we came up with a list of 100 or so systems. One by one, we tested and evaluated them, and only one software survived our testing. It's Koha. So we started right away in looking at Koha and testing its capabilities, particularly its future in with regards to the changing landscape of software architecture and hardware architecture. We did have a bad experience with regards to changes in the computer architecture, particularly if you remember, the DOS ICs, which is basically a 16-bit system. And from the 16-bit, a lot of libraries migrated to the 32-bit system, and a lot of data were lost. With that, Win ICs, when the Windows 2000 was released, a lot of problems again came up. Basically, the system, the WinISIS system, in a standalone or network environment, actually created or deleted data from records. There are many libraries that had this experience, including one of the international agency here in Manila. Uh, of 10,000 records, they have around 1,000 or so blank records through years of using the WinISIS. So we tried to look into this and tested Koha for its viability in application for public libraries in the Philippines. Now, looking at the other, I think the TIP presented the history. The first known Koha installation here, I believe they installed the 2.2 as discussed this morning. The National Library started with 2.9. And today, we are still using the 2.9 and we're deploying 2.9 because we created a lot of modifications with it for our public libraries that we cannot just migrate to the newer version. Our team is working with a migration to the latest version, but we are not ready yet to deploy it. Looking at the latest version, most of the wish list that we created in 2008 were actually addressed in the latest edition of Koha. So we are looking at the migration as one of our important activities since last year. But the National Library is actually using the Koha software in 7 systems. We have the cataloging server. We have the allocation system for the public libraries. We have the copyright system. Uh, this year, we'll be launching the Philippine National Bibliography in the web using Koha, the latest version of Koha, and some other small projects at the National Library. Now, the NLP package is basically the 2.9 version, but we're using the Fedora operating system, Apache Perl, and we're using the MariaDB database. We are very adamant with MySQL when it was bought by Oracle, so we tried to focus on MariaDB as our database up until today. And we added some small changes, basically configuration to make Koha a digital library. Now, it's good to have other systems to use as a digital library, like you can use Greenstone, you can use DSpace. However, if for a library that has very limited manpower and very limited budget to send the staff in training, it's very hard to maintain a lot of systems. It's better to have a single system that can do the things that we need or that we want to do in our library. And that's the reason why we opted to modify Koha to become our library platform at the public libraries. So it's just a matter of configuration and basically using the 856 tag in Mark 21 to come up with a way to provide a link after the search is done in the online catalog. And we modified the ISBD parameters to provide a base, to incorporate the base URL. So it provides some kind of versatility when you're using Koha in local environment at the same time in the internet. Now we added a database management software for our local libraries to easily manage the connections during library operations. Now we also created a sort of list that is needed by our auditors, government auditors. There's a commission on audit auditors. Um, Generally modifying the display parameters and providing an option to select a particular period of time by which COA normally have their reports want to be displayed. Now, we also created um, members self-registration form. The idea with this changes is just the interface. If you look at the intranet interface of members data entry, it will be very difficult for an ordinary person to follow through with the form. The form is really intended for an internal staff. And in a lot of cases, we don't need or the library does not require all those information. So we simplified it by creating a different display, focusing on what does the library need. So basically the name, the birth date, address, email address. We remove other data that the library does not really need or want to use. And from there, we created a simplified data entry consisting of around 11 or 15, depending on the library, 11 or 15 metadata for the members database. And when the client saves the form, the record is actually set as um, inactive. And then the process we change in the processing is that the user has to approach the library staff for the account to be activated. Okay. Um, Looking at the way the library processes its reports or the needed statistics, we created a facility check-in. And at the same time, it has a facility a log. It works like a logbook where the user can get using the barcode in the ID or any sheet of paper. The user can swipe the barcode in kiosk, and it will show the name of the person, notices if needed, like you still have these requirements to fill that needs to be filled up, and at the same time it can show the picture of the person. So we also started in relation to this, we started collecting photograph of our readers for future use, such that we can use this one in related software like face recognition. Okay. And the librarian can also use the check-in list to determine uh, inside the library, how many persons in the library at a very specific period of time. At the end of the day, it can also be used to generate reports, statistical reports on what time is the busiest day, what time is the busiest hour, what time would be the busiest week, what month will be the busiest month in a year, so that the management can make certain decisions with regards to improvements in facilities. We also created a simple title list for our staff to print or at least to save so that they can send this to relevant managers. Now, using a simple solution, not the RFID solution, but the barcode solution, we created a self-check out and return by modifying the circulation module and providing the related kiosk complete with a barcode scanner. And lastly, one of the hardest portion of Koha installation is the configuration of the Biblio framework that is match with the library level of cataloging. So what we have done in our package is that we created a pre-configuration of level 1 bibliographic record catalog metadata sets. And we just train the librarian on how to make adjustments if needed. So what we did with the parameters in Biblio framework is to hide the subfields so that it would be a lot easier to unhide them if needed by a particular library. Okay. Now, our approach is based from our experience with our local libraries. For 3 years, starting in 2009, 2010, and 2011, we validated our understanding of our public libraries by going around the country. We set or peg our visits by going to a particular province, visiting the provincial, the city, and the municipal libraries, and understanding their environment. With that, we created our training package and our approach with regards to how do we deploy this to our public libraries with the least effort at the same time, looking at effectivity of our office at the foremost. So we divided them into phases, particularly one, the pre-installation aspect where we focus on processes, library policies, and data structure. And then the installation of a generic configuration, and then localization to cover particular needs of library. And then we recommend during this localization process the setting up of the final configuration. After that, we look at the phase combining encoding or data migration if there is data to be migrated, followed by circulation, population of the members database, and the use of the OPAC. Now, using the OPAC is kind of monumental to a lot of libraries, particularly those that their managers would need something or some form of an event to showcase what they have done in the library. So we normally recommend that libraries will focus on around 80% of their circulation materials to be encoded in the system before they do the public launch of their online public access catalogs. And make sure that they finish within the next 1 year, the next year, the encoding of all their data in the system. Okay. Now, in the members database, for academic or school libraries with automated enrollment system, we recommend the migration or the copying of data from the registration system into the KohaCon module to at least to eliminate the problem of re-encoding them. However, there is also a technique. In case the registration system or the IT section in the registration system is not very cooperative or doesn't is not willing or they are not willing to work with the library, we recommend the simplified self-registration form for the library, particularly their clients. Okay, and then other modules should follow. We have the acquisition module. One of the areas that needs work is the use of the credit cards. Today, no government agency is allowed to use credit cards in its procurement. So that portion of the Koha acquisition module is not really helpful to government entities. I don't know if there are libraries, but so far I don't believe there are libraries who are using the periodicals subscription management of the acquisition. It is good, but very hard to implement. The use of the OPAC for students and faculty to recommend titles for procurement. That's a very hard. Not the system is very good, but I think it's the attitude of our clientele that makes it hard to use the recommendation component of the OPAC or the online public access catalog. Now, for public libraries, since we have direct engagement with them, we already have a good understanding of how the libraries work in the public libraries. We have a package that is ready for them to be used, and we just do the training in phases. Now, the key actually in our effort was the development of training packages. We have a lot of libraries, the local libraries, who only have one person in the library. Most of them come and go in a matter of 3 years because our election in the Philippines in the local government level is 3 years. So whoever is elected, in most cases, the library is one of the dumping ground of relatives of politicos or friends because it's a lot easier to send people to the library. With this, we have to accept that reality and we cannot have a direct control over this. So we tried to come up with a training package that can start with as low as zero knowledge in IT or in library systems. We did have encountered a few individuals who has not even used a typewriter, and we are training them to use a Koha library system. So that's a basic environment that we based our training packages. We got the Koha manual, but we modified it to suit this environment that we have in our public libraries. Um, we separated the portions that are distinctly IT and those portions that are library work, so that we have the versatility to divide the training modules if needed. So if the local government unit has a very good IT in their locality, we created separate training, one for the IT and one for the library personnel. In cases where there is only one person with no IT in the local government, we created a simplified IT component of the training package. So it looks like your grandma teaching your grandma how to do a MySQL backup when your grandma doesn't even know how to use a computer or a tablet or a cell phone. But we did succeed in that area. It's just as simple as creating a screenshot, creating a webcast to show them how to do it. It's just type these letters, follow the capitalization, type these numbers, press enter. Yeah. Sometimes looking for the enter key in the keyboard is already a challenge. So you can see hands vibrating around the keyboards, and sometimes they got nauseated. A few we did encounter a few of our public library staff in this case, talking about the techno stress. So our training focused more on hands-on. We, as much as possible, we limited the training lectures, but we focus on them doing. So when we conduct our training with this local government library personnel, we just show them a picture in the screen, and then we ask them to please type this. Next, step 2, press enter. Next, take a look at your screen, what happens? And then raise your hand if there is a different screen in your computer. And then somebody will attend to that particular person. Okay. Now, we recreated the Koha manual to incorporate the basics of the operating system, the basics of maintaining database, the MySQL database, particularly backups, checking on tables, restoring damaged tables. And so your Lola in the public libraries now has the capability to run MySQL in command lines, typing the necessary command to determine if the tables are damaged and restore the tables that are damaged. Okay. And then we have the manual basically reconfigured to have the screenshots and simple steps on what to do. And we also provided options. You can have the menu-based option or you can have the command line option. Okay. Now, the lessons that we have learned so far since we started using Koha in 2008 is IT and library skills are very, very important to succeed in the use of the Koha library system. Now, TIP, I don't know if is the presenter for the TIP this morning is still here? You know the story why TIP succeeded in Koha implementation way back? Yeah, the story is that the guy is IT and the wife is the librarian. So they succeeded simply because they are husband and wife team. So I always tell every library that are interested to be sure to have a very, very good relationship with each other, the IT and the librarian. Now, the problem with IT and librarians is that there are terms in the IT group that are same word or same term but different meaning. For example, when you talk about index in IT, that's a different index. You're talking about database indices. When you talk about index in library science, that is a totally different index. So when the idea of understanding each other fails, then your Koha deployment starts to fail. So you should develop a very good, well, this is a Philippine case. So I don't know if this works with other countries as well. But essentially, that's a very important combination. The IT guy and the library automation guy. Now, we have some problems like some library personnel are very good in library operations, but they fail to understand automation for the libraries. Okay. So be careful about that. My key, a lot of times I ask one question or I flag down questions like if they are asking, does the system able to print 3x5 cards? Oh, that's a red flag already with the library staff because Koha is not intended to print cards. It is intended to be used with the online public access, searching, display, and manipulation of data. So you don't, the idea of Koha is basically based from the 2009 International Cataloging Principle. The printing of cards or the 3x5 cards is basically based from the 1961 International Cataloging Principle. If you look at rules, you're looking at the AACRs, the implementing rules of the ICP 1961 or the Paris Principle. If you look at KoHa, you're looking at the ICP 2009 with ISBD as the basic implementation of the rules. And of course, the KoHa concerns, library automation concerns are mostly one-third of the problem. Two-thirds are problems that emanates from the library processes, library policies, um, and basically the human resource component. Some of them are trying to implement policies that are paper-based in a system like KoHa that is already for automation. It's very hard to mix the two. In the Philippine case, both in the academe and in practice, what we have found out are some critical policies. For example, most teachers in cataloging do not will outrightly do not recommend encoding or cataloging of serials. So a lot of libraries do not have bibliographic record for serials. And that's a problem when you're using a fully automated system. The idea of a fully automated system is for you to encode all your collections in the system. Now, many cases, non-book materials are not also encoded or cataloged, like pictures, um, music in the form of CD, DVD, VHS, cassettes, videos, um, and some other forms like maps, um, realia if you have one in your library. The problem is not the IT part, but the problem is how title, author, subject, etc. In a photograph, in a picture, how many areas do you uh, focus on? Actually, there are 12. But you cannot find them in AACR or RDA. They are found in other books. The problem is they are not commercially available. You have to do the research. In maps, how do you differentiate between different kinds of maps? Like, when do you know if it's a political map? How do you know if the map is actually a sea, a body of water compared to a land? How do you know if the map is a satellite map? How do you know if it's a road map? Well, sometimes it's obvious because there are nomenclatures of streets. Or how do you determine if the picture is a three-dimensional picture? What's the difference between photograph and a picture? And how do you group materials together? And making a mistake in the use of the tag will also make Koha useless. Koha was designed, well, if you look at the standards used by developers of Koha, they use the international standards, which are already being used for how many decades. But if you process your data using a different set of rules, then Koha in your cataloging process is not compatible. Then no amount of configuration with Koha will solve the problem. In IT parlance, it's called garbage in, garbage out. Now, the Philippine practice of not cataloging serials and other non-book materials is a different case, which I talk about in my lectures normally, and I call it Nino or nothing out. If you don't catalog your serials, then you cannot use the system to manage your serials, to search your serials, or do any manipulation of data for your serials. If you don't catalog your pictures, then you cannot do any processing activity with your pictures. Okay. Now, we started actually with a 5-day training module with Koha. And so far, it's not very practical in terms of the participants. We found out that the optimal training days is just 3 days with 6 hours per day. Try to spread out the spread out the time. Um, it's not the number of days that counts. It's the maximum amount of what they can absorb. And so far, 3 days, we found out that 3 days is the optimal number of days in training. Oh, did I turn it off? Okay. Ayaw na. Could you move the next slide? Okay. Now, for the National Library, the future that we are looking into is the migration to the current version. We're on the 17th version. We are working with Koha Philippine publication, maybe in the form of a bulletin, to have a website, a formal website with forum, knowledge sharing, and at least we can have a short survey to understand our efforts. We have actually created that in a temporary server, Koha PH website. It's available in the web, but it's not yet complete. Our community with Facebook is there. Try to join. We'll be looking at having a legal entity of the Koha Philippines community so that we can have more engagements, particularly events such as this KohaCon conference. And then we're working with having a online training system. We already have the Moodle in our the National Library, but we need more content. We already have Koha PH publication, but it's today it's still empty. But that one is using the OJS or the Open Journal System. We have the website made from Drupal. And then we're hoping that we can use this one as a knowledge sharing system with a forum and a way to document cases so that we can share each other's experiences to come up with solutions. And together, these things can be our platform for sharing both in the local in the Philippines and in other countries as well. Okay, so good afternoon. The wala na. Questions? Yeah.
Hello. Thanks a lot for your presentation. I was really looking forward to it, actually. I happen to do commercial demonstrations for Koha, for BibLibre, and I mention the Library of the Philippines every single time I do a presentation. The point being, when I'm talking to a library that's thinking of switching to another ILS, and I want to convince them and show them how good Koha is, I name a number of libraries, and the National Library of the Philippines has been one of them for years now. So I'm really happy to see this presentation and learn about how this all has happened here. I would have too many questions for you, so I'll just focus on two. I guess you need quite a team to do this whole project, so I wanted to know the size of the team behind this whole project for you. And I was also curious about your plan for migrating to a newer version of Koha, since you seem to be using 2.9, and that's quite an endeavor, but I'm looking forward to it. Seems very interesting.
Um, our team basically is the core team is three. One focuses on networks and systems. One focuses on database, and one focus on interface. But we have additional personnel that helps us with regards to hardware. Particularly, we have Philippines does not um, implement the separation of hardware and software. So sometimes we have a hardware that has an embedded program in its BIOS, which is set to boot in Windows. So we have to remove that component before we can install the operating system. So we have, well, three, four members of the team who is doing the implementation work. But we also get help from our other enthusiasts or other individuals from other government agencies. And well, thank you for mentioning us in your clients. We just hope that we can participate more actively in the Koha community. We are very silent with regards to what we are doing in the Koha community. Don't see us a lot in the discussion groups. We don't write a lot. Um, we just focus on what we need to do at the public libraries and the National Library.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Chad Diaz po from the SSS Library. My question is about the security po of the system. Although a while ago, sir, we already had a speaker na nag-discuss po nung about the security of FOSS. In our institution kasi sa SSS po, we are having a very strong resistance po ng IT namin with regards sa security po ng Koha library system natin. Tanong ko po is, basically, kayo po ba, sir, sa National Library po, had you had any experience po na nagkaroon po kayo ng external attacks like hacking or any similar incident po? Ano po yung ginawa po natin to address this issue po?
So far, we don't have intrusions with the Koha servers in our library. But to answer the question about security is about how do you deploy. It's a deployment architecture that should be considered first before talking about what security framework you have to implement. For our public libraries, we have our library with only one computer. So what we did was to strengthen the machine um, as a single machine. So we our deployment is actually um, installed and tested with one of our personnel who has European Council certification on network security. So it's also very important to have a properly certified individual to do that. So we secure the machine from the level of the operating system and all the related software that has been packaged into it, like the database and the Apache web server. So there are a lot of ways how to do it. But at the National Library, our deployment architecture is the network security is being managed by other servers. And we have a different approach with regards to security because, again, while we are the National Library, we don't get a good funding compared to other government. So we have to survive, maintain a data center with a very limited budget. However, as compared to the previous years that hackers went into a lot of hacking attempts to government websites, I don't know if you are lucky or because they were not able to penetrate the National Library systems. We just a matter of sometimes just a matter of um, creating some ways on how to deal with the intrusion problem. But we have 5 regular visitors qualified as intrusion attempts. But so far for the past years, they have not succeeded.